You know what? I think every artist should learn how to edge. Hey guys, it's Toniko, and I'm an animator within the animation industry. As a creator myself, as I work on my personal projects, I want to make this thing a long-term career. I want to keep making stuff for a very long time. There are things I want to do for myself within the medium of animation, maybe a bit outside, and I want to do it in a way where I don't feel like I'm burned out all the time. I've always had a high standard for myself. I always believed that if I wanted to do good work, I had to work super hard, I had to give it my all, and if I wasn't doing that, I was being lazy, I was lacking. The project I was doing wouldn't be good enough. So lately, I've been personally teaching myself to hold back, to not spend endless hours, to not spend 100% of my energy, of my time, just for the creative process. And when the urge of me having to go back to 100%, having to give it my all, I have to let it go. So if you've noticed, I've been experimenting with limited animation. I've been experimenting with economic styles, but I've also been trying to crank out small little bite-sized projects just to get it out there. And I will say it's taught me a lot about the process. But I also want to talk about why it's important for every artist or every creative individual to learn how to control their own capabilities, to work at an eco-friendly, low-energy output. So when I think about holding back in terms of creativity, I think about it in two ways. Now, the first one I want to talk about is holding back on your tools, on your resources. So I remember there was this one episode in the kids edition of MasterChef, and these group of kids had to saute or fry salmon, with each kid given a different number of ingredients they're allowed to use. Now, the kid that only was able to use 2 to 3 ingredients made the most simple yet the most effective dish, in my opinion. And there was another kid who was able to choose from 7 to 8 ingredients. You know, he clearly had an advantage, who felt overwhelmed, and the dish that he was making felt like it was going through an identity crisis. Now, the same type of stuff can be applied to something like animation. Maybe someone could be limited to using only paper and pencil compared to someone who has full digital tools and software that they can use. Maybe it's a direction where you can only use one software, or maybe use a few colors to finish your film. So when I was a first year at CalArts, the limitations for a first year student film was that it had to be under 90 seconds, it had to have black and white, no color, and no dialogue. And to me, I think the reason for this was to introduce new students to making animated films, especially to those who have never done it in the past, to get introduced to the medium without being overwhelmed with all these other things they have to think about, like color, dealing with a longer running time, and dialogue. Most first-year student films finish because by the time second-year students start their film, they're given more time. They can do color, they can do dialogue, and a lot of students get really ambitious to the point that they're not able to finish their films on time. And I feel like stuff like this breeds creativity. Now, the way I see creativity is that it starts with a vision, an idea, or an imagination. And part of that creative process is making that idea become a reality with the tools that you're given. Sometimes the tools that you're given are quite bare bones and limited, but that can be a blessing because it gives you less things to worry about. When the resources are plenty and there's a lot of freedom for that, it can breed to endless possibilities, leading to endless decisions to make. And that could lead to the temptation of being directionless. So sometimes limiting your tools is going to give you less choices to make. So learn how to hold back by embracing simplicity rather than overcomplicating the process of things, rather than complicating the arsenal that you have. So the next one I want to talk about is holding back your energy or holding back your capabilities. You know, making art or any creative project requires a lot of labor work and creative energy working in tandem. And if you want to be able to do this long term or make this a long term career, then you're going to need to learn how to not exert yourself all the time. So, for example, instead of giving 100% of your effort and your energy, instead of working super hard, what if you decided to go 75% at most? Or maybe bring it down to 50% or 40% of your time and energy? So let's say working on a drawing or an animated shot. You can add as much labor or as much detail as you want. Maybe you have the time and the freedom to do it, but I think it's good to exercise holding back. Like, how can you be effective with the limitations you give yourself? When it comes to creative projects, there's more to just showing off skill and labor and production value. There's also things like communicating a story, a joke, or trying to make a statement. So after the Dusk's Flight short that, I spent a lot of effort and labor on, I decided to make small, casual shorts that embody this silly side of me, this casual side of me. I've decided to become less precious about how the thing looks. Like in the past, I would just redo shots more than twice just because I wasn't happy, or I could never be happy with how something turned out. Especially when it's a personal project where I'm not paid for my own work. I've also learned to utilize working smarter or finding ways to make limited animation look appealing. And by the time I finish these shorts that, I'm only spending maybe 50 to 75% at max of my capabilities, of my energy, of my effort. When I wrap that project up, I don't feel like I'm super burned out. I don't feel like I need to take a break or I'm jaded about the process of animation. I can jump onto a new thing less tired, more excited. Not only that, I learned a lot more because I get to see a project from start to finish at a much quicker rate. This allows me to learn about the overall process of filmmaking. And I'm starting to prioritize what I want to say with my work. So I felt this difference by the time I finished my sketchbook Bros Gag. It's a stupid short. It's so casual and dumb, and the drawings are pretty crude and loose. That was on purpose. But the idea for it was funny to me, and the challenge for me was to make it a short, make it so that it's funny to other people. Now, by the time I finished it, I felt more energized to do more. But at the same time, a lot of people were reaching out to me about how they related to the short, how they related to some of the characters, how they know some of those characters in real life. And that to me is super heartwarming. Compared to something like Dusk's Flight. I finished that because I just needed to finish it. I was passionate about it for sure. It took a lot of effort and energy, but I think it was more of a sizzle reel than anything. It was meant to get people excited about like a what if, or people just saying how they like the look or the feel or where the story could go. But when I look at my past proof of concepts where I've spent 100% of my energy, they don't personally reflect to me with what I want to say with my work. So I want to show you guys two examples from the State of Secrets trailer that I did a few years ago. So a shot like this, I for some reason decided to spend all of my energy and effort with the in-betweens, with the lighting effects for a very simple shot. It's not really dynamic, and I remember it just took a lot of time and a lot of energy. This took me a really long time compared to this one. This shot is supposed to be way more dynamic. Context-wise, there's a lot of movement, but you can tell that like some of the drawings aren't really there, they're not really polished, and also some of these drawings are held more or held longer. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I didn't spend as much time on this. I decided to hold back because I had other things to worry about. This thing only took me a few hours, or maybe, only a couple of hours, whereas this one took me a lot of hours. And if I were to show you guys how many steps I had to do for it, it was just like, a lot compared to something like this, which was just, okay, rough, then I'll just clean it up from there. But the thing is that when you see it at a bigger picture, is that it's all combined in this one final picture. And unless you're really nitpicky, you're not really going to notice like which shot is more expensive, which shot is more cheap, unless you have an eye for it or unless you really seek that out. The important thing is thinking about the project as a whole and the priorities for it, rather than thinking about it by, just one shot over the other. Because like that shot where I spent less energy on, the one that's underwater, I think it's after this one, it only shows for like a few seconds, and then boom, you move on to the next shot. So, those are things that I wanted to bring up, and why it's important to sort of learn how to choose how to hold back on your energy. Like this one here too. The characters could have been animated, but I just decided to have the cloth and the hair only moving. So yeah. And I'll also say that learning how to hold back is going to help you refocus on certain things that you want to improve or you want to prioritize. So let's say I want to improve my solid drawing skills, my perspective, my foundation. What if I only did sketches with no color and just leave it as that? Same goes with animated filmmaking. What if I just made a film that is just consisting of pencil tests and rough animation? It's going to allow me to focus more time on that skill I want to improve. What if I just want to tell a story or a gag? I could just have an art direction that's super simple, very limited number of drawings, and just tell my joke. What if I told myself that I only had 2 hours a day of working on my own personal projects during the weekdays, and I want to get it done within a few months? These things are going to teach you a lot without having to feel like you have to work super hard just to be successful. Like, here's a challenge for myself. Like, what if I decided to make a film that just looked like this? This is the end product. This is the end result. As much as I can do fully animated productions, what if I did something like this that just looked like storyboards, but they were just more polished, more cleaned up, so it looks a bit more cohesive, consistent, and complete on its own? And if I were told I had to crank out 5 minutes once a month of finished material that looked like this, I can see that being doable. Like, if I only had, let's say, 2 to 3 hours a day to work on a storyboard that looked like this. Yeah, maybe. So I personally think holding back in general is going to teach you a lot of things. You know, you could be tunnel vision spending hundreds of hours, all of your energy, using all these tools that's given to you, that's available to you. I can see that lead to creative chaos, and that could overwhelm someone. Especially if you have super high standards for yourself. There's a part of me that doesn't want to put out stuff because I don't feel it's good enough. But I think for anyone to exercise creativity, it's good to exercise limiting yourself, limiting your capabilities, and limiting the tools that you have. And it's going to improve your problem-solving skills. How to be effective, yet limiting yourself. Every production that I've worked in animation in the industry, there was always some form of limitation, like how we couldn't shoot a certain shot, or how we couldn't have a number of shots, or how certain acting poses were not allowed because it might also confuse the vendor studio having to deal with the animation. Ideally, you want to make your process as simple as possible. And this also applies to ambitious projects. You could have a foundation of your project that was done with 25% of your energy, or something that was relatively easy for you to do. And by the time you want to amp it up to be more ambitious, to add more detail or production value or whatever that is, at least you have that energy and capability stored up after having figured out the overall basis or the foundation of your project. So, for example, I spend as little energy as I can doing my initial thumbnail storyboards because I know it's a very fluid state of the process that requires a lot of changes if needed. So I tend to work very loose and scribbly. And once I figured out my sequence, my shots and all that, I don't need to worry about that creative decision making. I can now move on to, let's say, cleaning up those storyboards so the drawings are better. Now I get to spend more of my energy focusing on the drawings rather than trying to figure out the storytelling aspect of it. So when they feel like they want to give it their all, they want to give it their best shots, and they want to spend all their energy on, at least they have the capabilities to that without feeling like giving 100% and being burned out is a norm. So yeah, learn to hold back, learn to edge. Thank you so much. Bye. Interested in learning hand-drawn animation or learning how to finish an animated shot from beginning to end? Have a look at the store where you'll find the complete Introduction to 2D Animation video course, tutorials, and other resources. Learn classical animation approaches, drawing, lectures, techniques, and other process videos. Visit the store through the link in the description below.